The following is a presentation of the Broadband universe, brought to you in part by Vitruvi, the end-to-end GIS-based construction management platform that connects asset owners, operators, general contractors, and subcontractors for unmatched project control and collaboration. Manage every aspect of your telecommunications or utility infrastructure construction program with Vitruvi. Build faster, reduce costs, improve quality. Book your demo today on vitruvisoftware.com to see how we can help you build at scale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broadband Universe podcast. I'm Craig Corbin, and it is a pleasure to welcome my guest today, Brent Skorup, the Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Brent, welcome to the Broadband Universe.
Thanks for having me, Craig.
It is an exciting time, and I know, looking at all that you're involved in, to say that you're busy would be quite the understatement because you have so much going on today.
Yeah, no, it's always something new in technology and telecom, but I enjoy it, and I hope listeners will check out my work in these areas.
Absolutely, and so much to get to in our visit today. Among other things that we will touch on today, work that you have done on a number of federal and state advisory bodies, one in particular, the Texas Urban Air Mobility Advisory Committee, also the Academic Board of Advisors for the Autonomy Institute. Definitely want to get to that, but just to set the stage for the conversation, give everyone a 30,000-foot overview of how you got to where you are now as a senior research fellow there at the Mercatus Center.
Yeah, it was a journey. So I've been at the Mercatus Center for almost 10 years now. We're based at George Mason University in the Arlington, Virginia campus. And I've been, in law school, I developed an interest in telecommunications policy. My mentor and professor, Tom Hazlett, who's now at Clemson University, he was a chief economist at the FCC, and really ignited an interest in me in telecommunications law. So I was, for 10 months in law school, I was a legal clerk at the Federal Communications Commission. And at that time, the AT&T T-Mobile merger was coming down, and they gave legal clerks and others, I had a front row view, at a low level, obviously, of that. But I was hooked on tech and telecom policy after that, and I've been in the think tank and research world ever since. What
wonderful timing to have that, as you put it, the front row seat for that merger. One of the things that I wanted to get to, and you made mention of having contact there at the FCC, and one thing in particular that we talked about earlier when we chatted was the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act that actually took your proposal that wound up dealing with, I think, a lease or auction airspace for drone and passenger drone services. And there was a proceeding and a rule change that the FCC instituted last year with over-the-air reception devices, the OTARD rules. Talk about that. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so the OTARD rules, it's a funny name for an important issue, over-the-air reception devices. So traditionally, I mean, this concept was coined in the 1990s. Congress told the FCC, protect satellite dishes on private property, because satellite in the 90s was the first viable competition to cable in the pay TV market. And so Congress instructed the FCC, hey, protect these dishes on private property. People are installing them, these small antenna dishes, and they're getting hit with zoning, permitting, and a lot of hurdles to do this. And it's a national policy to have competition in pay TV. So we view this extensive permitting and fees as contradicting our national policy for competition in pay TV. So this had been slightly updated over the years. Mm-hmm. What I added to it in talking with, in particular with fixed wireless and wireless companies, they were running into very similar issues that satellite companies were running into in the 90s, which is their landowners would want to put a small antenna on their porch if they're in an apartment or a balcony or a rooftop, and local zoning officials would prohibit that. So, after learning about this, I looked at the FCC's history here and said, you should extend these protections to homeowners who want to put small antenna up. And this was a few years ago when 5G was first coming out, and you could see the potential. People to receive and transmit, and it'll have transceivers on their balconies and rooftops and grain silos. Makes a lot of sense. They should not be hit with like accessory dwelling permit proceedings. So I initiated that with, and it got taken up by industry. I mean, I didn't take it all the way, but I initiated that idea, and industry and the FCC took it up and made that federal law last year.
That has to be rewarding, both personally and professionally. That your work that you initiated resulted in that change, the rule change last year.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. Obviously, I'm quite proud to see an idea become policy, and I hope, and from what I've heard, it is helping landowners and wireless companies install with freedom to know they're not going to be hit with kind of overzealous permitting and fees.
Well, and would you agree that given the tremendous need for connecting the unconnected, and especially in rural areas that would utilize that type of technology, that there's no more important time to have that kind of protection?
Yeah, that's right. I think in rural areas in particular, where either it's not economically viable, or if it is viable, it's going to take years to get wired or fiber optics out to these rural areas. Fixed wireless is going to be needed in the immediate future, and I'm hopeful, with small companies and landowners and large companies knowing that they're generally free. If it's a small antenna, you can put it on private property with pretty liberal rules.
Right. We mentioned the fact that you serve on multiple federal and state advisory committees. One in particular that I wanted to chat with you about, the FCC's Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee, and you're vice chair of the Competitive Access Subcommittee. Tell me about the responsibilities on that.
So the Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee was an initiative of then Chairman Ajit Pai, the incoming chairman in 2017 at the FCC, and he and the commission made it a priority. Rural broadband is talked a lot about today, but of course at the commission they were talking about it years ago,
right?
And so they created this advisory committee. Like a lot of federal agencies, they have outside advisory committees. And I can't remember how many. I think there are about 30 of us, academia and large and small ISPs and local and state representatives. But just there's a lot of benefit in a lot of public policy. Just getting people in the room, talking, peer to peer, and so the advisory committee for the 4 years or so that it ran. And it had various subcommittees, took up a lot of important issues like rights-of-way access. You mentioned I was on the competitive access subcommittee, but just how do you get quick and rapid and feasible deployment to rights-of-way and to utility poles and phone poles. But there are other subcommittees, and we took up a lot. And I encourage listeners, again, it's still up in the FCC webpage. You can find those proceedings, and some of that did impact what the FCC did in terms of shot clocks for pole access and that sort of thing.
Interesting. Also intrigued about your work on the Texas Urban Air Mobility Advisory Committee. Tell us about that.
So like a fair amount of telecom lawyers, I also do a fair amount of drone technology policy, right. and you're seeing, I'm not totally clear why that is, but you do see telecom lawyers increasingly doing drone and autonomous vehicle and new aviation technology policy. So the Texas Urban Air Mobility Advisory Committee, it was created by the Texas legislature last year, and our term is about to run up, but they gave us a year to make recommendations to the legislature about how to what regulations, what obstacles, what practical obstacles are in the way to these new aviation technologies like small drones and cargo drones and electric aircraft and so we have a report. I can't speak to the report; it's still pending. But we have a report that will be public soon, submitted to the legislature. And Texas is not the only state that has one of these. There's a handful of states that has these new emerging aviation subcommittees, and it's an encouraging thing in these cutting edge areas, just to get legislatures and regulators up to speed on the state of the industry, but also what are some of the policy fights coming in the near future.
And I am sure that will only grow in importance given the evolution with regard to that. You're watching the Broadband Universe podcast, brought to you by Lit Communities. Light up your community. You deserve better internet. By Vetro FiberMap, radically simpler fiber management. By OnTrack, proven leader in connectivity. And by Vitruvi, build faster, reduce costs, and improve quality. Guest today on the podcast, Brent Skorup, Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And you made mention of autonomous vehicles in your last remarks, and that is a perfect segue when we talk about the term I think that you had used when we chatted earlier was intelligent infrastructure. Everybody wants the ability to do a lot of things, but if you don't have an intelligent infrastructure, the challenges are huge. Talk about that, if you would.
Certainly. So I should add, a lot of my views on this were shaped in my time on the federal Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee and on the Competitive Access Committee, which dealt with issues of rights of way and how do you get more providers using utility poles and public rights of way, and just the very complicated and complex area of law and policy that is. So this intelligent infrastructure movement, I would say it's been called various things in the past. There's been a dream for at least 30 years, in part in federal guidance and state transportation officials of using connectivity for transportation services, and intelligent infrastructure represents the latest iteration of that. IoT or smart cities. I think all of these there's tremendous amount of overlap. My research in this area, I put out a paper with Professor Kurok Ray, who's at Texas A&M, an economist, and our paper is called "Smart Cities, Dumb Infrastructure," and our recommendations in that we saw a few things happening. You've got some technology trends like fiber optics everywhere, edge compute, 5G, small transmitters, cheap LiDAR and radars and other sensors. You also have some social and transportation service improvements, things like connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, perhaps drones. And in this confluence of events, in our view, and many others who work in this area, we think it's been a dream to have connected vehicles for a long time, but now we actually have the technology out there that you could feasibly do this. The issue as we see it, and we say in this paper, and as I see it, the public and private roles have not been well defined. You've got this very muddled picture about who does what, and public-private partnerships, is kind of a magic wand that makes all these things happen. But there's a huge spectrum of public-private partnerships, whether it's transportation or telecommunications. And so we want to clarify some of this, and we put forth somewhat of a dichotomy in that we think going forward, if you want connected vehicles or smart cities or intelligent infrastructure, as much as possible, you want passive infrastructure overseen and perhaps funded by the public sector. And by passive infrastructure, dumb infrastructure, we mean long-lasting, low maintenance assets like the public rights-of-way itself,
Right.
conduit, fiber optics conduit, vaults, handholds, utility poles and light poles. This is infrastructure that probably lends itself to public oversight and public investment. The flip side of that is you want the industry, the commercial sector, to have very free hand in the technology and services that are installed on the infrastructure.
Right.
And I don't know exactly what the services and technologies will be. I have a guess, like many others. 5G will be involved, perhaps Wi-Fi, LiDAR, radar, GPS supplements. But you don't want the federal transportation agencies or state transportation agencies dictating what
Right.
those technologies and services will be. And this, in our view, is why traditionally connected vehicle technology has, and in large part smart city technology has failed to gain traction. Certainly less than the hopes and promises from, say, 20 years ago.
Certainly, and that's the perfect segue to the work that you're doing on the academic board of advisors for the Autonomy Institute, a phenomenal group of corporations, individuals working for bringing autonomous mobility corridors into reality. Talk about your work with that organization.
Yeah, certainly. It's rewarding as a researcher to see your ideas, your public policy ideas gain some traction in the industry. And Jeff Taku, chairman of Autonomy Institute, we met. We were on a state, the Texas Connected Vehicle Advisory Committee, and we met through that. And we have a common interest in these things. And he liked this framework that Professor Krook, Ray, and I put out of this dumb infrastructure and smart cities, designed and on the device side, giving industry a pretty free hand. And so I'm an outside advisor to the Autonomy Institute, which is really spearheading and putting, finding a coalition of industry to promote this intelligent infrastructure industry, and because it does require, it's a very complex issue. You've got not just transportation, but also telecom involved and wireless technologies and different state agencies and federal agencies. It's a very fragmented area and requires a lot of private and public parties to really row together.
You mentioned the complexity. That is huge. The challenge is certainly real. But would you agree that it is the perfect time to be embracing this approach, given the tremendous amount of funding that is going to be available in the next decade, spearheaded toward broadband and connecting America?
Yeah, I mentioned, when Professor Ray and I wrote the paper, we saw these technology and social trends of connected vehicles and 5G and fiber optics. But now you do have another trend, which will definitely boost this area, and I think interest in intelligent infrastructure, which is funding. The IIJA, this massive federal bill, has a lot of components in it. Part of it is $550 billion new dollars for transportation infrastructure, and eligible expense. A lot of these programs, these new programs, will be, you broadly could be called, the smart city or intelligent infrastructure industry. And whatever you think about the funding, if it's too much or too little, it's important it's spent wisely. And if you look at kind of the history of federal spending in this area of connected vehicle tech, it's not very promising, and so I hope some of the ideas that Professor Ray and I have put out will guide some of the policy making at the state and federal level. Again, this kind of we think most helpful for public focus is not on the devices and technology and services. It should be on the rights of way, the competitive access to this dumb infrastructure, the poles, the conduit, and so on. But give a free hand to the industry, because even those in the industry have only a guess at what services will be viable in the long term. So, and public transportation officials at the state and federal level, they have a lot on their plate already. The idea of like managing and maintaining the largest IT project in their jurisdiction is too much to ask, and so I think their focus is much better on the infrastructure, the dumb infrastructure side, where they have a history of doing that.
One of the points that you just made in that last remark, I think, is a great way to wind up our visit, and you talk about the need for being able to wisely invest those available dollars. And that's why it's important for people like you to be involved, and a huge thanks for what you have what you've done, what you're doing, and what you will do down the line. Really intrigued. We've run out of time for this visit. I know that we will have an opportunity to visit down the road, and can't wait to see what has developed with your continued work. Brent, thank you so much for being with me today.
Craig, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and thanks for letting us be a part of your day. We'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Universe. So long, everyone.